Well, Sam, thank you so much for helping my project. I understand you're actually an aerospace law student over at Ole Miss.
Yes, sir. I mean, I'm trying to, in the process at least.
Could you tell me a little bit more about yourself, like what got you into that and
Yeah.
like your other interests?
So, I originally I was just I wanted to go to law school and I do the criminal law thing and all of that. And then my senior year at UCF, I actually University of Central Florida, I actually took a space law course, and I was like, oh, this will be interesting. You didn't really think much about it, and then I took it and I was like, wow, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. This is really cool stuff. Like, you never really realize that there's a whole body of law that is existing that just deals with everything outer space, from the moon to resources to just how we get people up there. So it just blew my mind, and I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and here I am. So
That's awesome. I've actually interviewed a couple of space lawyers that work for like the European science organization or space organization, not ESA, but like ESO. You know, the people that run like the telescope down there in Chile and what have you. But it's amazing, you know, kind of all the aspects of space law. And what are some of the things that most fascinate you?
I mean, I'm mostly interested in the mineral like resource exploitation and all that. And essentially I don't know if it's the actual term for it, but I kind of classify it as like space infrastructure, because I don't really think there's a way that we're going to actually explore the whole universe unless we have you know essentially gas stations out there with places to stop and places to refuel, places to because we don't have like cryogenic sleep or anything, so it's not like we could just go 3 years with people sleeping on board, so we have to stop and refuel, let them stretch their legs essentially. So I that outer space resource exploitation, I guess it's the colonization stuff. I guess that's kind of why I write more about that than anything else. But the whole aspect of outer space law in general is just it fascinates me. I mean, I kind of bother my parents and my friends with it because I just talk about it 24/7. I feel like so.
Well, so recently, you know, China sent a lunar lander to collect some moon rocks, and it's on its way back. And as part of that mission, they planted a Chinese flag on the moon. Now, we have six U.S. flags and one Chinese flag. Um, does any of those have? I mean, I know the Outer Space Treaty says no country can claim, you know, all anything off of Earth as itself. But you also have this concept of facts on the ground and um, non-interference and things like this. To what extent does um, sort of creating more facts, you know, more areas on the moon that you have operations, kind of help to lay the groundwork to have more freedom and the ability to kind of control what happens there?
So I'm actually writing one of my papers for one of my classes right now about customary international law in outer space, which is essentially what it seems like they're doing. But both the United States and China have these places where they planted flags and everything, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's their territory, right? Like, I mean, we in international law and the Earth, we've had cases where planting a flag necessarily means it's your territory, but in outer space, it doesn't necessarily mean that because, like you said, we can't appropriate territory. But I think what they're doing, like you said, like laying the groundwork for these kind of situations, is they're not necessarily pushing the envelope, but they're kind of expanding the definition of what we can and can't do very slowly until it's to this point essentially where it's like, yeah, we've been doing this for so long. It might not necessarily be against the outer space treaty, but it might not necessarily be inside of it, but we think that it should be incorporated like this. And I what the parallel I try to like draw is military uses of outer space, because it says in I believe it's Article 4 of the Outer Space Treaty, it's like peaceful uses, and not necessarily having war fighting domains in outer space or satellites that can track things and things that we use in war. It's that's not necessarily not war fighting, but it's been defined as non-aggressive or defensive, and it's this whole expanding, like slowly expanding of the outer space treaty is that's what we're going for. I believe. I think that's what we should be doing as well. It's just I don't necessarily think it's as I don't think we need to be as rash about it. If that makes any sense, because the Outer Space Treaty it's created in this really broad fashion that it's kind of like, hey, these are all the things you can and can't do, but we're not necessarily going to define every little bit and piece of it, because I mean, it was written in the 60s. It's around then, and it's, you know, it's it's an older document if you think about how fast technology advances with regard to space. And it's, nobody thought we would be doing these commercializations of the space sector and having all of these entities that aren't government run. But the Outer Space Treaty covers all of it, but it doesn't necessarily cover everything we're doing. And that's kind of long story, you know, short story long. It's, what we're doing is we're trying to get these defined terms in there, because if people can say yes or no, you can't do that, then it's like, okay, we understand that. But you have to get to this point where people are saying yes or no, or it's been practiced long enough where people are like, well, yes, we're doing it and everybody else likes to do it, so therefore we should be able to do it. But territory wise, I don't necessarily think that's going to be a thing. I don't think anyone's going to be able to necessarily put this territorial appropriation. But if you go in the aspect of, you know, moon mining and the Artemis Accords and how they have these essentially like exclusive zones, that's a whole different story that I am not as educated on. But I think it's fascinating. I don't really know how to describe it other than it's something that should be done, only for the sense of defining the actual terms in the Outer Space Treaty and making people make a choice. But it could go wrong. If that makes any sense. So
Yeah,
did I answer your
absolutely.
question? I'm sorry.
No, for sure. Well, let me kind of explore with you another area that's always kind of caused me a little concern. And that is, it's one thing to have like multiple space faring countries try to figure out how they're going to coexist and operate with each other. But then you have sort of this other dynamic, which is between current spacefaring countries and space enabled countries and non-space enabled countries. And there's far more non-space enabled countries than there are space enabled. And, you know, I could imagine like the space enabled countries are going, you want to see the table? Go get a space program, you know?
Mhm.
And then the non-space faring countries are going, hey, we're going to eventually get there, but we have domestic issues we have to take care of first, but we want to make sure there's a spot for us whenever we are. And, you know, both of those seem legitimate to me. But
Mhm.
at the same token, it seems, how do you reconcile that?
Well, so we actually, I wrote a short article. It was an op-ed on the Crew Dragon launch from Kennedy Space Center, and the whole theme about the paper that we were talking about was how commercialization is actually bridging that gap. Because instead of having to, you know, create your whole rocket and launch it from, you know, Russia or wherever, you know, you can, like the United States was launching exponentially more from Russia and charging lots more money, but that's a whole different story. But like commercialization has actually bridged this gap about, you can get up there a lot faster without having to develop your whole space program. You know, I mean, it's not anything that's like $100 ticket. It's not like taking an air flight, you know, but it's getting there, and eventually it will get there. So that's solving part of the issue, but also the dynamic between, you know, non-spacefaring and spacefaring nations. I think for like the outer space resources kind of exploitation thing, there's been a strong push by a lot of authors that I've read that have kind of paralleled it to the deep sea mining, and how you need to, you know, if you're going to mine this location, you have to put aside a location with just as much resources and just as large and things of that nature. And I think there's a thought to be had there. I think there's definitely something that we can pull from there, but I don't necessarily think that's the end goal. You know what I mean? I think there needs to be some form of equitable, and, you know, I'm not sure if that's the correct terminology, but some form of equal use and equal ability to get up there and mine these resources. Because obviously I don't want, you know, United States or Russia or China to have all the resources and be like, you guys can't get them up here, you know, this is all our stuff. Because it's not, the moon's not owned by them, you know, the moon's not their property. It's everyone's property essentially, but it's no one's property at the same time, you know, this whole global commons thing. But anyways, there's I think there's a middle ground to be had. And I think the customary international law approach is a faster approach, and I think it's a very much easier approach to go about it. But also, it does at that point get into, well, these states are able to do it, and, you know, these other states aren't able to do it. So how are they going to really have their voices heard? And at that point, it's only going to hurt themselves to really voice their opinions against it, if that makes any sense. I'm not sure how familiar you are with customary international law. It's
I'm I'm not.
essentially, so the way customary international law is formed is you have two elements. You have the I'm trying to like not use all these Latin terms and everything, but it's essentially everyone's practicing it and you believe it's law or you act as if it's law. And
It
then
sounds like almost like what the English would call common law.
essentially it's they've put it, it's this giant, it's like this subsection of international law where it's like this is a lot of stuff, but not necessarily something that bears a lot of witness. But the whole way that people don't have it become binding on all states is they say, oh well, we're gonna object to that. But if they object to something on the moon, then it's like, well, you're only hurting yourself because then you're saying, oh well, that doesn't apply to us, but it doesn't necessarily not apply to everyone else. Do you see what I'm saying? It's this kind of like ambiguous thought process, and I could be explaining it a little bit wrong, but that's my general understanding of it and how I've had it explained to me. So it's, the customary international law approach is a very good approach to go into outer space and have these things function. But then you need some kind of form of treaty law as well, to where it's not just the United States, Russia, China, and the EU and all these big space actors saying this is how it's going to operate and this is how we're going to do things. So I'm not. I don't have the perfect solution yet, but I think there's definitely a combination of something to be had there and some form of just bilateral agreements too. Like I mean that's what the United States is doing, but I think long story short, I think commercialization is solving the factor of getting to outer space, and I think we're headed in the right direction for solving it legally or in outer space, but I don't necessarily think we're there yet because I mean, like you said, it's these people aren't up there, these nations, these states aren't up there, and they're not able to yet, but we are, and it's like, well, at what point do we make it equal and not sacrifice the ability of our nations to go up there and do what they want, but also not infringe on the rights of other nations. So I think it's a very amazing concept, and I think it's something that we'll see soon, but I do not have a perfect solution.
It occurred to me that there may be an Earth analogy to the situation, and that is countries that don't have a coast and the development of international shipping law. Like they obviously don't have ports. They could have, nothing keeps them from building ships and having ships operating that would never ever touch their country, right? I mean, I suppose then I guess you do have that. You have flags of convenience. That's a whole nother thing, right?
The whole interesting concept. Yeah.
It's like who will have the least restrictions and be the give us the most benefit, and even though we have nothing to do that country, we'll register our ships there and flag them accordingly.
One of my finals questions on my international law final was actually similar to that. So it's like, give me flashbacks over here.
I was just prior to this meeting, I was kind of dreaming of non-COVID days that are hopefully in our near future. And I was thinking about going to the International Astronautical Congress in Dubai next year. I only been one other time, that was 2016. I went because Elon Musk was going to talk about his interplanetary transport system, unveil that. And I was like, man, this is a historic moment. It's hard to believe that was only 4 years ago and we saw SN8 kind of fly. But, as part of that, meeting, they have a international space law moot court competition. I was wondering if you were familiar with it.
I've heard bits and pieces about it. I'm not on the team. A couple of my friends are, but we actually, when I was an undergrad, we did a problem out of it. But I'm familiar, but not familiar-ish, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess what is your ideal career path? Just out of curiosity. I mean, like, do you see yourself kind of working like for one of these international governmental organizations, or would you kind of be like in private practice doing consulting, or like what is your thought?
I've had a couple different opinions. I work as like a summer associate right now for an aircraft financing firm, and I think that stuff's really interesting. So I think what I've floated the idea about possibly doing that and transitioning that into the space sector. I mean, because we have all these rockets and we have all these giant places that we need to rent out and tie everything down and have it not out in the rain. But my original thought is I wanted to work for NASA. I still kind of do. But also, I mean, I'm kind of open to everything. I want to work in the private sector. I want to work in the government sector. I want to put my hands on the law and deal with it and see how to try to use it. I don't know. I'm so interested in how this is, how everything works. But I mean, right now my end goal is to get at NASA. Honestly, I mean I'm born and raised in Orlando, and I've watched rockets go up from Kennedy since I was a little kid. So I just think that would be really cool. Mostly, but that's where my end goal is currently. Kind of deal with it on the ground level there and just kind of see where it goes. But I'm open to so much. I want to be dealing with the law. If that makes any sense. The law of space, because it's this new sector. It's this new body of law. I knew it's like 50 years old, but it's 50 years compared to hundreds of years. It's not something that just happened, but it's not something that's is old and has all these like cases. I mean, if you go look for cases on this kind of stuff, you have like nothing. You have substantive law, but you don't have cases. And it's, I don't know, it just blows my mind, because I try to explain how I work with this stuff to other people, and they don't understand it. But I want to be there. It's like this is a new field. This is something that's starting. This is something that's going to be, people are going to look back when they're on different planets and like, oh my god, did you know there was a time when this wasn't regulated? It's like, yeah, like we're here, we're doing that right now. So I don't know, I've probably figured out a little bit more. But I just know it's something I want to do. I'm not necessarily, I don't really care exactly where I am. I know there's places I would like to be, but it's just, I want to be dealing with it. I want to be doing it. I want to be making sure that everything is the way it should be. If that makes any sense. Very type A, this needs to be how this is, But I mean, I've worked with a couple different places, or not a couple different places, but I mean, I'm a fellow right now at the NSS, the National Space Society. We have a couple of my friends that, or not my friends, my other classmates that do that too, and I think the work they do there is amazing too. But I'm not necessarily sure that I could, get a job that it's gonna pay for me. I'm pretty sure they have mostly volunteer positions, but I love the work they do there. That's it. I don't know. That's something that I should figure out. But I just love the course material, and I love the substantive law about it, and just how everything is. It's so ambiguous, but not at the same time.
I think the thing that makes space law so challenging is jurisdiction is so unclear, right? And I mean, at least with like ambiguous happenings that happen within inside of a country, you at least have sort of an agreed upon framework and power structure to deal with it. But I mean, SpaceX Starlink satellite runs into Chinese reconnaissance satellite. Go. What happens?
Yeah. Well, we well we had an assignment on this too. It's really similar, because you have these, you have international responsibility and international liability, and so like, yeah, you have to go through this whole structure about like, well, you can't necessarily sue SpaceX, but you can sue the United States, who would have to sue, or not sue the United States, but you have to go against the United States, who would have to in turn get their money from SpaceX. So it's like, yeah, it's this really wonky, like, well, yes, this is how it should work. You should just be able to directly sue the company, but companies aren't government, not non-government entities aren't they aren't bound by international law. It's states are the parties of international law, unless you have something specifically that says non-government actors, or which technically the Outer Space Treaty does, but then they have to go through this whole different dispute resolution kind of issue. But non-government entities aren't they aren't the subjects of international law. International law is binding on states and binding on organizations that are international organizations that have put things in international law, or have subjected themselves to this. But it's the commercialization aspect holds a whole different like body, not body of law, but a whole different problem into it. Because it was United States were running into a Chinese satellite. It's like, okay, we see who the parties are there, we see how we can get to there, who was wrong here, who was wrong, and then you can add in this government, like non-government entity kind of thing. It's like, oh well, yeah, like the United States is who's responsible for SpaceX, but like we don't want to like get money from the United States, we're going to get money from SpaceX. So it's like you have to go through this whole different dispute section. And you bring in articles on state responsibility, and it's I don't have my paper pulled up for it, but it's like a three-tiered approach. Like, yes, you could be responsible for it, but then you have to show that the United States are responsible for them, and then you're still going after the United States, if that makes any sense.
No,
You see what I'm saying?
it does. Yeah, no, you go after one party, but that's not really the party you want to. I mean, it's like suing the delivery driver when you're really wanting to get after the employer's insurance, or
Hmm.
maybe the other
Yeah,
way around or something.
yeah, it's really wonky. It like makes sense, but it doesn't make sense, and it's like, you know, you're connecting these dots that are like, you're instead of going like 1 to 2, you're going to like 1 to 3. It's just like, whoa, I see how we got here, but it doesn't make any sense to me. So,
Exactly. Of course, I mean, in the case of the Starlink satellite, and considering kind of the limited knowledge I have about China's legal processes, I, how is it not possible that China goes, that's fine, you're not going to pay us. There's a Tesla factory here. That should do fine. Thank you.
I, I I couldn't tell you, but I mean it's a thought of mine too. Why don't they just, oh well, we have all of your stuff here. We're just gonna take it all, and which I'm sure has probably crossed everyone's mind that's dealing with it. But I I also am very ignorant of China, so I don't know their legal system at all. But yeah, it's close enough.
Yeah. Um, well, let me ask you a few questions about the moon since we're here.
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
So when did you find out that we're planning to send people back to the moon in 2024?
So I heard whispers about it back in about, I guess I graduated 2018. So yeah, 2018 I heard whispers about it. I hadn't heard a set date. The earliest I can really remember was when I was joining the Air and Space Law Journal in the spring of my first year at Ole Miss, and we had a discussion about the date of it because it involves a certain passcode that we use somewhere. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I was like, oh my god, that's right. 2024. Like we're there. Oh, do you know if it's gonna stay that date? Sorry, I don't mean to cut off, but that's just popped in my mind because I've heard some whispers that it might get backed up.
Um, I think the 2024 date was definitely a priority of the current administration, and is not a priority of the incoming administration. I also think that a lot of people are skeptical of the 2024 date anyway.
Hmm.
I think there is probably a little bit of thought around, does it make sense to keep the 2024 date with kind of like understanding that that will probably slip to 25, 26, as opposed to, oh, okay, it's really going to be 2026 and that slips to like 2030. I mean, it's like,
Hmm.
uh, it's like,
Typical fashion.
yeah, exactly. But at yeah. So, I mean, the other thing is, the official plan is that SLS and Orion gets the astronauts to around the moon. We have a private lunar lander that actually takes astronauts down to the lunar surface and back up. Um, I don't have much. I mean, SLS has been very challenged to do anything, and that Boeing and Lockheed. I know some engineers there, and they are just as enthusiastic about space and the future as you and I are. But the management of Lockheed and Boeing strike me as people that are just simply, how do we make next, how do we keep profits going up and make the next quarter and what have you? And from their perspective, doing one more test, doing one more thing, the less they have to fly, maybe the more profit they make and the less challenged they are. So my money is actually more on, SpaceX and Blue Origin doing something that we're not even thinking about right now.
Well, I agree that SpaceX definitely has one of those well, we're there already kind of attitudes. So it wasn't necessarily a shot, but I definitely have heard a lot of people. I remember when I first was really looking into it, people were talking about changing the objective from the moon to Mars, and I was like, whoa, guys, like, whoa, let's slow down there, pump the brakes. We got to get to our neighbor first. But yeah, no, I definitely remember the first time I can really remember thinking about when we actually had a date set was last spring. But it's I'm so excited. I don't know. I've always looked at the first landing on the moon, and I've been like, wow, man, what must it have been like to see somebody land on another planet? And it's just, it blows my mind to think I'll probably be able to see that in my lifetime, or I think I will see that in my lifetime. There's no doubt about that. It's just a matter of when.
Oh no, I think you will too. Uh, I lived through one very transformative decade, the 1990s to from 1990 to 2000. I think if you talk to a common person in 1990 about email, internet shopping, Twitter, Facebook, I mean, regardless of how hard you tried, I swear they couldn't imagine it. I mean, I couldn't imagine. I would never have thought Twitter and Facebook would have been a thing in 1990. If I did, this would be a very different conversation. But
No,
anyway,
I'm right there with you, man. I was there with the like the inception of MySpace, and I remember like oh my god, this is so cool. And then like I mean, I was born in the '90s, so I didn't experience the whole transition, but like I remember the same thing. I'm like, when I first got my email, I'm like, I'm never gonna use this. Like, what? I'm just gonna get spam in it, And then all of a sudden, I have 3 different emails that I use every day for like 20 minutes at least, and it's just like, oh my god, like, it's too much going on here. But yeah, I agree. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but it's nuts. It's absolutely mind blowing.
it is, and I mean this device. Well, it's see how invisible
Yeah,
it is.
no phone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa!
Well,
He's doing a magic trick. Yeah. That was a good
yeah,
one. Yeah. No.
yeah.
Mm.
But I mean, you could use it for payments. I mean, how often I go like running and I'm like, I don't have my wallet. I'm like, oh, that doesn't matter. I got my phone. I'll just go. Choop.
Mhm.
And it's so funny, Bill Gates actually wrote a book over there at Microsoft about the road ahead, where he talks about the electronic wallet. And there's like this rivalry between Microsoft and Apple, and then to have Apple be the one that actually does it, it's just like, whoa.
Oops.
Whoop.
Somebody dropped the ball there.
But I think the 2020s are going to be that same level of transformation when it comes to aerospace as the 1990s were to the internet. Like, I mean, I think in 2030, I mean, you've heard what Elon talks about in terms of Starship.
Bits and pieces. I haven't been able to focus a lot on news this semester. It's been hectic, but
Well, I mean, he's talking about a single Starship being able to make 3 trips a day. He's talking about the Boca Chica factory being able to produce 2 of them a week. And
Jeez.
couple that with the fact that you could carry, 100 tons or 100 people, at a time. I mean, that's like, in my mind, going from the single person aircraft to like the 747. It's just like,
Mhm.
it's just like, hit reset, forget everything you thought you knew. Let's start back at base zero of what we can do.
It's well, that's another thing. If you've looked at how technology has how it's progressed, we had this conversation. I remember this conversation. I've had a couple times, but like with memory, like we used to be able to buy what, like a 3 gigabyte like hard drive at the storefront Office Max. Now they're 32 gigabytes. I can't talk. And then like a terabyte of memory used to be insanely expensive, and now it's like, oh, anywhere from like $50 to $100 you can get a terabyte of memory that's just an external hard drive. And if you apply that to outer space, it's like, it's exactly what you're saying. It's going to double. It's going to go from doubling every 10 years, doubling every year. We're going to see these launches that just it's exponentially more than what we could have ever thought was going to happen. It's I'm right there with you. I don't know how to verbalize it, because it's just mind blowing to think. We used to launch on like rockets that we would just we're one and done, and now it's like, oh, these things are landing. I remember when I heard that, I was like, they're reusable. They're not just reusable shuttles. They're reusable rockets that come back. Like, was he remote controlling it? I was like trying to figure out how it was working, and it was blowing my mind. And you have these leaps in technology that we've seen, and if we progress like that, I completely think that's possible. There's no doubt in my mind that could potentially happen, but it's about getting there first. So but I definitely think, I think you're right. I think what Elon said was, it seems way out there, but it's completely possible. I think we will see the 2020s and the 2030s be the next step for outer space.
Now, regarding our plans to go back to the moon in 2024, most of the non-space people I've talked to don't know about it. I was wondering if that surprises you.
It doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, I think because I'm so close to Kennedy, and well, when I'm home, that I'm kind of insulated from that. And then when I'm up in Oxford, Mississippi for school, it's, I'm surrounded by people that are either hearing me talk about space all the time or like are in the same field as me. But it does surprise me, but it doesn't surprise me, if that makes any sense. Because people are very, they only see what they want to see. They don't, if they're not necessarily interested in space, they're not going to spend as much time on it. Or if they're not, space nerds like us, they're not going to be like focusing on it all the time. But I think there's definitely something that needs to be said about the fact that it's not, a world renowned thing. Everyone knows about it, but they don't know about it, if that makes any sense. I, in a perfect world, everyone would be focused on space. Like I think everyone should be, but it's, it's people have their own things they're most focused on. So it doesn't surprise me, but it does, if that makes any sense. It depends.
I mean, do you think that's a hindrance? Like not having, these space developments being generally in people's mind, do you think that hinders our ability to kind of go out and develop space?
I think it does to an extent, but also the community that really is involved with space and space resources, they're passionate. It's not somebody that's like, oh, I'm only here for money. They're like, I'm here to get this to the next level. I'm here to make this happen. And I think they're so driven that it does hinder us to a certain extent, because when you see things in the news like, oh, well, NASA's funding has been cut or something like that, some people will just be like, oh, whatever, we don't need to send in people in outer space. And then you have people like us that are like, wow, that's not good. Like, that's where we get all of our like next technologies, and that's where we need to be. But I think the passionate group of people that really is involved with space, they won't let anything that will really hinder us like that happen. I mean, we've got people in Congress that, Jim Bridenstine, he's the guy, but I think I saw that he's retiring or resigning. But I mean, he was just like very go at it, go do it. We're going to do it right now. And then you have Elon Musk, who's, putting all of his money behind this. And he's like, we're testing this now. We're going to test this until it works. I think it hinders us to an extent, but I think definitely the community and the people involved in the space field won't let it hinder us as much as it could, if that makes any sense.
Well, and I think one problem that we have in terms of like government funding is, I think people think NASA got a lot more money than it actually does. I mean, I think a lot of people would be surprised we spend more money renewing our nuclear arsenal than we do on NASA.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that was the number, but I definitely agree, because I mean, we get a lot of money, but like not compared to everyone else, or for anything that we could really do. It's not we, but NASA. You know what I mean? It's the amount of money that I've seen go into their. I don't know their budget right now, but I mean that statistic you just told me, that blew my mind. I didn't even know that, but I knew that comparatively it's not a lot. And people see rocket ships and they see the dollar signs and they think, oh my God, that's X number of Lamborghinis. Like they don't think, oh well, that's less than a percentage of the U.S. government's budget or anything like that. They don't think comparatively. They think, well, they don't think comparatively with something that actually matters. A Lamborghini, you don't necessarily need that. But I think a lot of people see what they want to see as well with the budget. It's, they're very focused on what they could have as opposed to what could be happening in the outer space realm. But
yeah, I know last year, like before the coronavirus year, I think the NASA got like 0.4% of the US budget. Now with coronavirus, that really drives down that percentage a lot. I think we're at 0.2%. But
it's just a bit. Yeah, it's nuts. It always, whenever we talk about the NASA budget, I always get this bad taste in my mouth, because it's always like, everyone's always like, oh, well, we should change the budget. And then they change these goalposts, and then things go wrong. And it's like, oh, well, see, we shouldn't be giving them that much money. And it's like, oh, well, you changed the goalpost and you made, we were going from the moon or going into the outer atmosphere to going to another planet. And it always just bothers me when I think about it, because that's always, whenever you see an issue with the outer space and NASA, it's always somebody's moved a goalpost or somebody has changed a timeline, and it just drives me nuts, because it's this self-fulfilling prophecy, like.
But I mean, if you look at what we got from NASA in terms of human spaceflight versus what we get from their commercial partners, it's like night and day difference. I really feel a lot of the money that goes to NASA does get wasted. These cost plus contracts. Just the contractors with a lot of political influence just kind of uh, not having to deliver anything, and then you see like SpaceX and these commercial lunar payload services program. I didn't know if you know about this. Have you heard about the commercial lunar payload services program?
I've heard bits and pieces of it. Is this the through SpaceX or?
Oh, well,
Um,
actually, it's a NASA program. They selected 13 companies that can bid each year on delivering payloads to the surface of the moon for NASA. They're responsible for picking the launch provider, creating the spacecraft to get you to around the moon, landing on the moon. NASA just pays essentially a package delivery fee, but it frees up these companies to do whatever they want to with any additional capacity that they have. So like this video is going on a micro SD card that's actually going on the Astrobotic lander next year as
whoa.
part of their thing. So you'll be on the moon.
No pressure, right? That's
Future,
awesome.
future generations will judge our entire existence by this one moment. So
Oh, look at the guy in the red shirt. Oh, I'm drawing faces on me. Yeah. No,
yeah,
I agree definitely about there's certain places that I think NASA can fix the budgetary crisis and crisis, I guess, put some spice on it. But um, I agree with you that these public private contracts are actually the way to go, because I mean, like SpaceX and stuff, they're not focused on what to say in the news. They're focused on, hey, can we do this or can we not do this? There's a whole different driving factor between a government organization and a corporation. But I mean, that's just the burden. I mean, that's just the way the beast is. It's no matter how you look at it, that's just how it's going to be. So
yeah, indeed. So not everybody's as enthusiastic about space as you and me. There's a lot of people who are like, hey, we have so many problems down here on Earth. Why are we focusing on going to the moon and what have you? What about these other problems? And I don't really see them as being mutually exclusive. But at the same token, I do raise a good point about we do have a lot of problems going unsolved. So how do you kind of relate the opportunities of space to people who are facing those challenges?
I mean, I think this is a whole big picture ball game kind of deal. I mean, from the monetary issue, I think people always focus on, like we talked about earlier, how much money is at NASA, and people are always, well, that money can be spent this way. It's like you said, it's 0.4 or 0.2 of the budget. It's like, realistically, yeah, we could do that, but I mean, we'd be putting what, not like a couple $100s in people's hands, and that'd be great. Don't get me wrong, I would love a couple $100. I'm sure that we could go very far, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. And then also with regard to focusing on other issues, I mean, these people are scientists. They're rocket scientists. They're going to be focusing on making rockets, whether it's for NASA or for Lockheed or anywhere else. I mean, their brains are wired a certain way for a reason, because that's what they're interested in. That's what they focus on. And then I guess the third prong of did you say how space has helped essentially how space has helped us on Earth? Is that what you were asking?
Well, yeah, and not just people on Earth, but maybe people who are, uh, kind of, yeah. I mean, how is this, like the average person on the street? Why should they get excited about our future in space?
Well, I think that as well as another three kind of prong kind of deal. But I think there's a whole thing to say. I mean, not about national pride, because I think that's a whole. I think that always bothers me. But there's something to say about going, and saying, "Oh my God, humans humans have reached another planet. Or humans have reached outer space." I think there's something to say there. That's definitely something that's given me pride. I know it's not necessarily something that a lot of other people have seen, but I mean, not that, but the technologies that we get out of outer space as well. I mean, it's a common thing that people cite whenever I see this issue come up. I mean, like Velcro and things like that. It's, not exactly the most exciting stuff, but we have outer space, researching outer space. It always influences how we think and how we have things on Earth. I mean, the advances in technology, the advances in just practical day-to-day things. And I mean, I think realistically, it's a really hard question to say. How is somebody that's not interested in space, how does this affect them? I don't know, because I'm not interested in space. I'd have to go talk to like somebody who is. But I think it's just it's amazing to see. I think people don't realize how big of a deal it is, and I think once they actually do, that's when they say, "Oh my God, we're focusing on this, but we don't need to, we don't need, maybe we don't need to focus on it as much, or maybe we aren't focusing on it as we need to be, but it's something that it gives you pride. It gives you pride as a human being to see, oh my God, we as a race, as a species are out there. And it's ingrained in humans to really want to explore. And someone that doesn't want to explore and know what's out there, it defeats my whole like thought of how humans are. So I don't know how to really classify that. It's a hard concept for me to really gather, but I think mostly if there was somebody who just flat out said I hate space, I think space exploring is a bad idea, I'd probably have to tell them like, well, that smartphone you got, those shoes you got, everything you have has been not a direct result from outer space, but technological advancements that we've seen in outer space. Your TV, how do you want to watch TV? How do you want to, we have satellites out there because we know how to get satellites out there, that we can use these internet and TV broadcasting satellites. So I think it just has to be a focus on the technological advances that we've made. But it still would just blow my mind to find somebody that doesn't want to, see anything in outer space. It's just so foreign to me.
Have you heard of a program called Space Hero?
I have not.
So it's something that's just getting started, but it's a worldwide contest. It's going to be essentially a reality TV show where the winner will get to go to the International Space Station for 10 days. I know a few of the people involved, and it seems legit to me because like Axiom Aerospace is the provider that's going to be actually responsible for getting the winner to the International Space Station. And they're, of course, sending Tom Cruise next fall. So seems like a very legit type of thing. I mean, the conversation completely changes, I think, whenever you talk about sending astronauts versus, hey, what do you think about sending you? And I was wondering, do you think this program is going to help a lot of people engage with it, or is there some risk that it might actually kind of cheapen and misdirect, take the focus away from the main thing? Like, what are your thoughts?
I think it'll do a lot. I mean, I can see the whole we don't want the ISS to be a gimmick or anything like that. I understand that whole thought process, but I think showing the general public that it's not something that's so foreign. It's not like super secret like Area 51 that's orbiting the Earth. I think showing people that the layman essentially can go up into outer space. I think that's a great idea. I think that's something that we should be doing a lot more, honestly. But it's a little dangerous to put somebody who has no idea what they're doing into a rocket half the time, So I think it's definitely a great idea. I think it's something that that's really interesting to me, because I'm like, oh man, I'd love to go to the ISS. Like, but I think it'll do a lot. I think it'll show people that space isn't this just thing that's out there that we just can't get to. It's having somebody like you or me. It goes up there and it's like, oh well, I'm here. I'm here. I've been on Earth my whole life. I've never really thought I would get into outer space. I wanted to, but I never thought I would. And then boom, you're there. I think that would do a lot for people's understanding of how we get to outer space and how outer space is not out of reach.
So if it was safe and affordable, I'm taking it you would go to space?
Oh, 100%. I mean, safe is a. I mean, my mother is terrified of flying internationally, flying in general. So I mean, she's always said, if you're gonna go to outer space, I'm gonna freak out. But I'm like, man, I would love to go to outer space. I mean, you could tell me right now, it's not necessarily super safe, but it's free for you. I'd be like, okay, let's go. Those chances only come across you once in a lifetime. I've always wanted to. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I was always like, I want to be an astronaut, but I would love to go in outer space. Space fascinates me. I mean, even if it's just on those what do they call them, the vomit comments where you get into the zero G, I'd love that too. I think there's so many cool things out there that I would just about die to get into outer space.
How far would you go? Are you talking about like a suborbital flight, or a week in orbit, or 2 weeks to the moon and back, or would you go for a couple of years to the Mars?
I've always joked with my friends, I'm gonna have like moonfront property eventually, and they're always giving me crap about. Yeah, we'd be right next to each other. We get our globes next to them.
Yeah, because I keep telling my nephew I'm going to be retiring on the moon. So
I would love it. Yeah, right next to each other, look down at Earth, good like view. But no, I've always said, yeah, I've always said I want to retire on the moon, or I'd love to live on the moon. Mars, other planets, I'm a little iffy on, only because just the amount of time it takes to get there. There's so much that could go wrong that I as myself, I mean, like, if somebody offered me, I'd be pretty hard pressed not to like say, yeah, I'd love to go to Mars. But also at the same time, I think maybe I've just watched too many sci-fi movies, or oh, everything can go wrong on a 3-year trip to Mars. But I'd love to go, but I definitely think if there was like if the time frame was lessened, if it was like we could like teleport it there or something, or maybe even a week, like a week. I've done a week on a cruise ship. I can do a week on a spaceship. Like I can do that. That's fine. But I think I get a little stir crazy after like the first year. So
And another kind of wild card is life extension and
mhm.
regenerative therapies. I mean, if you have a reasonable, good confidence that you're going to feel like you're 30, 40, all the way up into your 150, 200, you're like, oh, it's 3, 4 years.
Oh no. Yeah, I agree. I definitely, I don't know. There's something about the whole like 3 years to Mars is always just kind of like stuck in my head as like, maybe not, but definitely it's not off the table. We'll say that.
But I mean, you're really looking at a 6 month journey there and a 6 month journey back. What adds the time is really waiting for the planets to align so that you get that time. So you'll be spending most of the time on Mars. So it's not like you'll
Okay.
be traveling so much. But.
I guess I had a different understanding of that. Yeah, my dad does the physics. I just do the law.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a great partnership.
Yeah, yeah. He yells physics at me. I go, okay, Dad, sounds good.
Well, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that we didn't get to?
Not I can't think of anything. I think we've covered everything. I really enjoyed this, honestly. I was a little terrified. I didn't know what to say coming into this, but I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Well, if it helps at all, you probably feel a lot more comfortable than the random people I talked to at Starbucks before COVID.
Oh, I understand that. Trust me, that's probably me with people I talk law to. What are you talking about? Like,
yeah, I just came here for a latte, and now I have to tell you about the future of humanity. This is a little too much.
Did you know we're doomed? Oh, I feel that.
Well, cool. Man. Well, you have a good rest of your day, and I'd love to stay in touch. You mind if I add you to my email list? Probably about one email a month. Awesome.
Yes, sir. That's the should be the @go one.
Okay.
Yeah, whichever one you have, probably.
Sounds good. Well, good luck on the space law, and I can't wait to cross paths again.
I'd love to. I'm very excited. I'm very excited with your project too. Please keep me updated on that.
Will do. Okay, take care.
All right, take it easy.